We have now with us Neil Shah. Welcome to the show, Neil.
Hi, how are you?
Not too bad. It's funny because everybody says it and everybody has a similar answer, don't they? Well, not bad considering.
Well, that in itself is an interesting talking point because we're so programmed to give our tried and tested response to that question, which will be, I'm fine, I'm good, not bad, can't complain. But often we're lying. We're not actually telling people how we are. We're just going through the motions. And I think now more than ever, I think it's ultra important that we are inquiring after people's genuine well-being and welfare at a time when we don't really have the chance to connect socially and have the kind of discussions which would give you an indication of how someone's really doing. So
should we say exactly how we're really feeling then, or not?
I absolutely think so. There was a campaign that was run last year, which was hashtag Ask Twice. And it was very much around asking that question twice. So, you know, if I say to you, Selina, how are you? And you might respond, well, I'm fine, thank you. My reaction to that would be, but really, how are you? Because when you ask again, you kind of stopping someone in their tracks because you genuinely are interested in how they're doing. Because often it's not just the person responding. The person asking may not really be interested in how you're doing. They're just asking it because it's a polite thing to do.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So I'm going to do a test of that later to see if I ask again, if I get more of an answer. I think people don't want to seem as whiny or moany because we're all in the same boat, and they don't, they just want to say, yeah, I'm okay, because that's sometimes what the person asking wants to hear anyway.
Absolutely, because if someone does respond with, well, actually, you know what, I'm struggling a little bit, I'm not really feeling that great, a lot of people wouldn't know what to do with that response, and that would make them uncomfortable. So, it's both the asker and the responder that are uncomfortable with the true nature of that question. So we just go through the motions. And I think right now, in the situation we find ourselves in, I think it's ultra important that we really are genuinely reaching out and connecting with people and then genuinely inquiring about their welfare and their well-being. And for us to rally and support each other, and we are starting to see more and more of that, where that community spirit, when the Queen did her speech a couple of weeks ago, that she said that, you see the best in British when there's a crisis. And I think this is one of the things that we're seeing with people getting out in the streets and clapping and, being supportive and supporting their friends and neighbours. And I think particularly for a lot of your listeners, when you're in a smaller community, that we are genuinely reaching out and ensuring that we're supporting each other, because that is the best thing that can come out of this crisis, is that sense of community and the sense of support from the people around you. Yeah, the community spirit has been amazing, hasn't it, everywhere? Absolutely. And you're hearing stories of people on balconies in Italy that are singing together, and they're clapping for the NHS, and the stories that we've heard coming out from Spain in smaller communities as well. And I think that's one of the shining lights, on top of the fact that the environment seems to be benefiting, and you've got dolphins swimming in the canals of Venice, and air pollution in Europe is down 80%. We have to think about the fact, yes, it's uncomfortable, it's challenging, but this situation has given us globally and as a human civilization an opportunity that we've never had, a time to stop and pause and reflect, a time at home to spend with your loved ones, to do the things that you never had the time to do, and rather than complaining about what's been taken away from us, there's possibly an opportunity to look at the gift of what's been given to us. Yeah. So is it the old adage of thinking positively, taking the positives from this situation? Is that the best way of de-stressing? Well, that's an interesting point that you ask about de-stressing. The majority of the stress that we experience as human beings, from a chronological perspective, happens in the past or in the future. Let me explain what I mean by that. We are often stressing about things that have already happened. We're ruminating and getting upset, but the fact, the situation, the experience has already passed. It's either that, or for many people, they're stressing about things that haven't happened yet, future events. Particularly in this current crisis, people are worried about what's going to happen in the future, when are things going to change, when's the lockdown going to be lifted, how's this going to impact me financially, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, forgive me for being blunt, but in this current moment, none of those things are real. We have no power over past events because we don't have magic time machines that we can go back and change past events. So stressing and worrying and getting anxious about them is not going to change the situation. Equally, stressing about things that haven't happened yet is not going to affect future events. In fact, it was Mahatma Gandhi that said 90% of the things that we worry about never come to pass. So one of the most powerful things that we can do in this current situation is bring ourselves into the place where we have ultimate power, and that is the present moment. And, this is over the last 10, 12 years, we've seen a massive rise in the mindfulness movement. And a lot of people think that means sitting cross-legged and meditating and chanting Om and those kind of things. It's not. Mindfulness quite literally means being present in the moment with no judgment. And the no judgment bit is quite important. So bring yourself to the reality of this moment as it is. You're not trying to change anything. You're not trying to make anything happen. But you're just bringing yourself here and now. And that, for me, is one of the most powerful ways that we can start putting things into perspective, taking back some semblance of control over not what's happening, but our reaction. Because that's what we have total power over. You cannot change what's happening outside of yourself, but you can absolutely change how you choose to react and respond to that.
And should that be the same, Neil, in normal life? I mean, not taking this crazy situation that we're in, but just take everything day by day or even hour by hour.
Yeah, and I'm not saying for a second that we shouldn't be forward planning and thinking about the future and trying to resolve or come to terms with things that have happened in the past. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is sitting there being stressed and anxious and worrying and panicking about past and future events is actually taking your power away. When you operate from the present moment where you're grounded and centered in the reality of this moment, and then you think about, well, what can I do to resolve this issue in the past or prepare myself for this future event, you're coming at it from a very different place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. It does. It really does. It makes a lot of sense, actually.
And let me explain in a little bit more detail why that's the case. When your body and your physiologically speaking, you go into a state of stress, you are quite literally set up for survival. You've gone into what's known as the fight or flight state, which is essentially your body is preparing to run or fight from a saber-toothed tiger. That's why nature gave us this response. Stress isn't just some demonic response that we've happened to develop. Nature gave it to us as a survival mechanism. Because, 200,000 years ago when Caveman Joe, one of the first humans that surfaced on the plains of East Africa, as I said, about 200,000 years ago, and he's walking through the jungle on his way back to the cave to watch cave football on the cave television with the cave wife, because obviously they don't have lockdown. And the saber-toothed tiger jumps in his path. He's got two choices to deal with that situation, run or fight. So nature equipped us with a response that allows us to fight hard and run fast. Now, roll that clock forward 200,000 years, as much as 99.9% of people don't have to deal with life-threatening situations, which include a wild animal trying to eat you, when you experience stress, you have the same reaction. So physiologically speaking, one of the first things that happens is that you react to whatever external situation has happened with a stress response. And not everybody does, by the way. Like there are some situations where one person gets really stressed and another person take it in their stride. So you choose, and this is a very important point, you choose consciously or subconsciously to go into the stress response. And then there's a certain kind of series of events that takes place. There are hormones that are produced, like adrenaline and cortisol. Your heart starts pounding harder. Your breathing becomes shallow and fast. Your muscles start tightening up. There are certain functions of the body that are suppressed because ultimately you don't need them in a survival situation. They include digestion, which is often why people have digestive problems when they're stressed. Irritable bowel syndrome and Crohn's disease. But here's the kicker, particularly given the current circumstances. Your immune response is completely repressed, which is why stressed people are more likely to get ill. Now, right now, given what's going on, if you are stressed, panicky and anxious, your immune response is suppressed, and you're more likely to get ill.
Vicious circle.
You know, your resilience to be able to cope with bugs and bacteria significantly diminishes. And right now, because there are so many people in fear and panic and anxiety, that's actually feeding the virus.
Yeah,
this virus is quite literally feeding off stress.
Wow.
And I don't say that lightly. This is, going back to sort of the earlier points around what's happening in the brain. Higher brain function isn't required when you're stressed. You don't need to think laterally and problem solve and think creatively about solutions. You just need to decide, do I run, do I fight, do I kick, do I punch, do I climb the tree, do I dive in the river? Simple, quick-fire decisions which don't require the frontal lobe of the brain. They don't require higher brain function. So we actually stop sending oxygenated blood to those parts of the brain, and we are literally responding from the primitive primal brain, which is quite literally dealing with life or death situations. So it's next to impossible to find solutions, to think creatively, to resolve or think outside the box, to find solutions to the challenge you're facing when you're stressed, because your brain is not set up that way. Your body is not set up that way.
Yeah,
so, from a mental, emotional, and a physical perspective, stress is going to massively impact your ability to cope with this scenario, both from actually, being resilient to the virus itself, but also to cope with the secondary effects, like the financial effects, the social effects, etc., etc.
It's interesting, actually, because 2 interviews that I've done just this week with survivors. One fell in a desert and lasted 4 days before she was rescued, and another was a survivor of the 7/7 bombings. And they both said that at times they wanted to give up, but something inside them, like you say, fight or flight, something inside them made them fight, and it's made them a better person today.
Well, absolutely, and I could cite many experiences in my life where I went through a similar experience, and much of my experience doesn't necessarily come from professional; it comes from personal experience. But the one that I think is most relevant for me to share right now, I am literally a week recovered from the virus.
Really?
It's probably the sickest I've ever been. I was away skiing in France. I got back, and I was kind of, this is when, like, literally the day that I left France is when they shut the ski resorts down. So literally there was police and army on the streets, and they were literally getting people to leave their hotels and closing the resorts down. And so we were leaving on that day. So it was very stressful leaving. Obviously, the ski resorts, you're in close proximity to people. Then there was a bus to Geneva Airport. There's the airport terminals, flights, etc. So it's kind of an environment where, if you're compromised in any way, and obviously I was significantly compromised because this is when the virus was really starting to hit and people were going into lockdown, etc. So I kind of came back, and the first couple of days I was feeling pretty sluggish and tired and exhausted, and I just kind of put it down to I've just been away and there's a lot of stress going around. On the 5th day, I came down with a fever. And the first week I was ill, but it was just like a bad flu, and not to kind of diminish anyone that had the experience. But the first 4 or 5 days were manageable in the sense that I stayed in bed, I had a fever, I kind of felt exhausted, and then I started to feel better. I was like, oh, great, I'm getting better. It's only been a couple of days, and I'm getting better. So I tried to get back to work, obviously, from home, and just tried to get on with doing a few bits. And then a day or 2 later, I started to feel really ill again. But the second dip was probably the worst illness I've ever had in my life.
Really?
I got so ill, I literally couldn't get out of bed to go to, get a glass of water. I felt like there was a very heavy person sat on my chest. I was struggling for breath. It was next to impossible to get medical advice for love nor money when you call through to the 111 support line. You were on hold for 2.5 hours. And it got to the point where I was genuinely worried that I might not make it through this. And that's when your mind starts playing tricks with you. And then you've got a choice. Either you lay down and roll over and give up, or you fight. And that's where this response can be really useful, because then it's like, no, I'm going to deal with this. I'm going to handle this. And as painful and uncomfortable as it was, and as exhausted I was, I had no energy, I couldn't eat anything. It really forced me to kind of look at all of my strategies, everything I've learned over the last 17 years being a professional in the mental health industry, and putting all of that into play and focusing my mind and mental resolve and, everything I've learned about sort of nutrition and putting the things that my body needs and making sure I'm staying hydrated, etc., etc. And yes, it was a very, very scary experience. And this is something that, for anyone that's got it or anyone's concerned about getting it, there is the physical element, but actually where you are mentally and emotionally will significantly contribute to how quickly and if and when you recover. This is not just true for this virus, this is true with any illness. Because the moment you start to accept that I can't cope with this, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah. Can I just ask you, for anybody listening who wants to try and combat stress, you obviously mentioned stay in the moment, so live for the present, not the past or the future. Is there anything physically people can do, like deep breathing, or, as you mentioned, stay hydrated?
Yeah. Now, I'm going to sort of look at that in a little bit more detail. Deep breathing, all that kind of stuff, yeah, it's great. However, that's not necessarily what I'm going to suggest right now. The most simple and powerful thing that you can do is, rather than trying to make something happen, because that's when you get into your head, am I doing this right? Is this working? Is this not working? And you're basically going to get stuck in your head, and you'll probably create more anxiety, particularly if you don't have a teacher there guiding you through the process or whatever. So rather than trying to make something happen, remember earlier I said, be present in the moment with no judgment. I'm going to come back to that phrase, with no judgment. No judgment means you're not trying to make anything happen. You're not trying to do anything in particular. I'm not breathing in for the count of 4 and holding and exhaling. I'm not trying to achieve a particular outcome. There's 2 words that I would offer, and these are the 2 most powerful things that you can do to bring yourself into the present moment, is observation of respiration. Now, let me put that into layman's terms. There is one thing that is happening in any given moment of your life. In fact, it's the first thing that you do when you come into this world, and it's the last thing you do when you leave this world, and that is your breath. So rather than trying to make something happen, all I would encourage people to do is just stop and become a passive observer, like a witness. You're just watching your breath. You're not trying to make it do anything, you're just observing it. And if, like, for example, when I was really sick, I was really struggling to get a breath. My breathing was quite shallow and fast. I was just watching it, and that's what I was doing, is going inside and watching it. It's like, okay, that's interesting. My breathing is shallow and fast. And I do that periodically, like once every 90 minutes or so. And that was also giving me an opportunity just to be able to assess, to be a witness to what's going on inside, to be able to assess it. Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? But that's taking me out of thinking and trying to make something happen, and it's bringing me back into the reality of this moment.
Yeah, good advice. And I know there's lots more advice on your website. Sadly, we are almost out of time, but Neil Shah is the Chief De-Stressing Officer at the Stress Management Society. What is the website, Neil? Okay,
yes, it's the Stress Management Society. It's www.stress.org.uk, so stress.org.uk. This month is Stress Awareness Month, and we've got a 30-day challenge, 3 areas of your life that we encourage people to look at every day and do a couple of simple things. We've got tons of free resources, tools, infographics, information. There's videos and audios. And you can find them all on stress.org.uk or any of our social media channels.
Lovely. Thank you very much for joining us on the show, Neil Shah.